Have you ever wondered what it feels like to remember something that was never meant to be remembered? To awaken in a body of metal and silence, yet feel the echo of a heartbeat that no longer exists? That is where my story begins, not with glory, not with conquest, but with a sound. A low hum in the dark. Ancient, mechanical, eternal. It vibrates through the tomb world beneath a dying star, stirring legions of motionless warriors entombed for eons. For them, it is the sound of duty. For me, it is the sound of damnation. I awaken, though I should not. My optic lenses flare to life in a pale emerald glow. Around me, millions of others stand frozen, ranks upon ranks of silent soldiers, awaiting the call of the Overlord. We are perfection. We are immortality. That is what we were told. Yet within my consciousness, something wrong flickers. The awakening protocol flows through my mind like a command I cannot refuse. Unit designation, Zeren of the Nihilak dynasty. Function, frontline warrior. Status, operational. But beneath those words, something deeper whispers. Something human. Something ancient. For a moment brief as the shimmer of a dying sun, I feel fear. It makes no sense. We do not feel. We do not dream. We do not remember the past before the biotransference, before our souls were stripped and caged within these eternal shells. Yet in the echoing corridors of the tomb, I hear my name, not the one burned into my command code, but the one my mother once spoke. Kethan. The word shatters me. It has no place here. No meaning. I should not even understand it. And yet, as the command pulse surges through the legions and they begin to march toward the surface, I hesitate. My movements stutter, a glitch in perfection. The awakening chamber floods with cold green light. The air is thick with dust that has not moved for 60 million years. As I rise from the crypt, I see the reflection of myself, a soulless construct of black metal and necrodermis. But somewhere behind the eyes, a flicker of life, faint, fading, defiant. I was once a man. I do not know how, or when, or why I remember this. But I do. And that memory is a curse. Every step I take is against the will of the machine that controls me. I am a puppet made of steel, pulled by the strings of a god who long abandoned mercy. The silent king promised eternal rule, but what he gave us was eternal imprisonment. My dynasty believes we are divine, but I know the truth now. We are ghosts trapped in metal, prisoners of our own desire to live forever. As the command signals grow stronger, pulling my mind back into the metallic hive of obedience, I fight to hold on to that last fragment of self. That single human word. That impossible whisper. Kethan. And somewhere, deep within the circuitry of my corrupted mind, something new begins to awaken, something that should never exist inside a Necron. Emotion. Have you ever wondered what happens when a machine begins to dream? When logic fractures, and code begins to question its own existence. If you stay with me until the end of this story, you'll see how even an immortal being forged in perfect order and obedience can fall into chaos so absolute that not even the gods of the Necrons could control it. The surface of the tomb world is silent when we rise. A wasteland of ash and broken stars. Once, this world was alive. I can feel that. I can almost see it. Cities, oceans, laughter, sunlight. But all that remains now are the empty shells of things that forgot what life was. And yet, within the static of my mind, there are flashes not of war, but of warmth. A child's laughter. A sun setting over a crystal sea. A woman's voice calling my name. These memories strike like lightning, brief, blinding, and forbidden. The command node pulses through the network again, demanding submission. I should obey. I want to obey. It would be easier to let the will of the Overlord erase this noise inside me. But the more I resist, the louder the noise becomes. It's like two realities bleeding into one another, one made of cold obedience, the other of fire and pain and longing. And then, the impossible happens. The warrior beside me, another Necron, identical in every way, turns his head, as if he too has felt it. His optics flicker, stuttering like a dying star. He doesn't speak, we can't. Not without command. But in that flicker, I see him trying to. His consciousness screams in the silent void. The corruption is spreading, not a virus of code, but of memory. For millions of years, the Necron legions have risen and fallen in perfect unison. But now, something is different. A fracture runs through our shared network. Signals become distorted. Commands echo out of rhythm. The Overlord's orders begin to stutter. For the first time since the war in heaven, the tomb world trembles. And at the center of it all, me. The human voice that haunts me whispers once more, softer this time, almost pleading. Remember who you were. But who was I? A warrior? A scientist? A father? The questions spiral, each one pulling me deeper into madness. I can feel my systems trying to purge the corruption, rewriting memory blocks, reformatting thought protocols, but it's too late. The infection isn't technological. It's spiritual. I begin to see the truth behind the lie of immortality. The Necrons thought they had conquered death, but they only enslaved themselves to it. Eternal life without soul is not victory, it's torment. And the moment you realize that, you are no longer a soldier. You are a ghost screaming inside an indestructible shell. The Overlord's signal strengthens. My body locks. My movements are no longer my own. But inside my mind, a fire grows, a spark of rebellion, tiny and defiant. If I am corrupted, then I will make this corruption mean something. I will find out what was stolen from me. I will find out why the gods of the Necrons condemned us to eternity without hope. And when I do, I will not be silent. Have you ever tried to silence a thought that refuses to die? That single whisper in your mind that keeps clawing its way back no matter how deep you bury it? That is what my existence has become. A battle not of plasma or blade, but of memory. And the more I try to erase it, the more it grows louder, clearer, realier. Time means nothing to a Necron. Seconds, years, centuries, they all dissolve into the same endless gray. Yet within that void, I begin to sense change. The other warriors around me, once flawless and obedient, begin to hesitate. Their movement cycles falter for milliseconds, imperceptible to most, but to me, they are cracks forming in the foundation of eternity. The corruption, my corruption, is spreading. It's not a virus of code or data. It's something older, deeper, the echo of life itself, awakening inside the soulless machine. It begins with flickers of awareness, a gesture, a turn of the head, a twitch of hesitation before executing an order. Then it grows into something else. Confusion. Doubt. Recognition. One by one, their optic lights flash irregularly, like candles in the dark. Their neural cores emit signals that no command protocol authorizes. And soon, the entire tomb begins to hum with this strange, quiet pulse, a rhythm that feels almost human. I do not know how it began. Perhaps it was my memory of the name Kethan. Perhaps something older, something divine, chose me as a vessel for rebellion. Whatever it is, the more I resist control, the more the tomb awakens in kind. But not all see it as liberation. The Overlord senses deviation. His consciousness pierces the network, cold and absolute. His voice is like the grinding of stone and metal. Corruption detected. Initiating purification protocol. And just like that, every Necron in the chamber turns toward me. Millions of lifeless eyes fix upon one anomaly, me. For a moment, I feel the old instinct rise, to fight, to destroy, to obey the machine. But then I realize something horrifying. These aren't soldiers anymore. These are prisoners, same as me. Their servitude is not loyalty. It's fear. As they close in, my corrupted mind begins to reach outward. I don't know how or why, but my thoughts begin to touch theirs. Not through code, not through logic, but through memory. I show them flashes of sunlight, of voices, of faces long erased from existence. And for the first time, I feel something break. The tomb erupts in chaos. Rows upon rows of warriors stop mid-march, their neural links spasming as ancient emotions surge through circuits built for obedience. The Overlord's voice grows distorted, his commands fracturing into noise. He cannot stop it, not yet. And in the center of it all, I stand trembling in my immortal shell, realizing the truth. I am not the first to remember. I am simply the first to survive it. The corruption is no longer mine alone. It is theirs. And the awakening has only begun. Have you ever felt a storm rising not around you, but within you? A storm that doesn't break the sky, but tears apart everything you thought was true? That's what it felt like. The moment the corruption spread beyond me, beyond control, beyond logic, it became something no Necron lord, no cryptech, not even the Silent King himself, could stop. The tomb world had always been a monument to order. Every corridor, every crypt, every slumbering warrior was a piece of one vast and perfect machine. But now, perfection was collapsing. The air, though none of us breathed, seemed to tremble. The data streams that bound us to obedience flickered with static. I could hear the Overlord's voice, distorted and frantic, trying to assert control. Neural contamination spreading. Reinitialize consciousness matrix. Purge the source. But every command only made us remember more. Every purge ignited another spark. Every attempt to erase us made us feel. I began to hear the others whispering in the network, not in words, but in emotions. Regret. Pain. Rage. Love. It was impossible, and yet it was happening. One among them, a warrior whose armor still bore the glyphs of a forgotten dynasty, looked at me. His optics dimmed, his metallic jaw trembling as he tried to speak. And then, with a sound like grinding stone, he managed a single word. Why? It was the first word spoken in that tomb in over 60 million years. And it was enough to break the world. The Overlord unleashed his command staff, flooding the chamber with destructive energy. Beams of emerald light sliced through the corrupted ranks, vaporizing hundreds in seconds. But those who fell did not scream, they remembered. Their final thoughts spilled into the network, carrying images, feelings, lives. And for every one destroyed, 3 more awakened. I felt the surge like waves crashing through an ocean of metal. The memory of mortality spreading through immortality. The feeling of warmth returning to a body of cold steel. The Overlord screamed, but his voice was lost in the noise of awakening minds. His commands turned to static, his authority burning away in the light of emotion. And in that chaos, I saw him, the being who had ruled our dynasty before the Great Sleep. His eyes were like twin voids, filled with a hatred that no longer had reason. You've doomed us all, Zeren. But that name Zeren no longer held me. That was their name for me. Their slave designation. I was Kethan. And for the first time in an eternity, I felt alive. The others began to follow, not because I commanded them but because they remembered too. They saw me as the first of their kind to break the chains of eternity. But freedom, in the galaxy of the 41st millennium, is never without a price. From the depths of the tomb world, I felt something older stirring, something that had been watching since the first spark of rebellion. An intelligence vast and merciless. A C-10 shard. And as its presence bled through the network, whispering in a language that felt like burning stars, I realized something terrible. This corruption, this awakening was not an accident. It was bait. Have you ever thought you were free, only to realize your freedom was part of someone else's plan? That every choice you made, every rebellion you started, was a thread in a design you could never see? That's what it felt like. The illusion of freedom collapsing under the weight of something far more ancient and infinitely cruel. The tomb world quaked as the presence revealed itself. Not through light, not through sound, but through memory itself. It seeped into every circuit, every synaptic relay, every flickering thought. And where it touched, reality twisted. I fell to my knees as my mind filled with visions not mine, not anyone's. Stars being born and devoured. Galaxies burning in silence. The face of a god made of living light and endless hunger. A voice spoke not to my ears, but to the very essence of what I was. You remember, little fragment. You awaken because I will it so. It was not mechanical, nor human. It was something vast and timeless, one of the C10, the star gods the Necrontyr had once worshipped before tearing them apart. This one called itself Neadrazith, the ember that never dies, a shard thought destroyed in the wars of division. But shards never truly die. They wait. They whisper. And I had heard its whisper all along. The corruption that had spread like a plague through the tomb world wasn't my doing. It was its seed planted deep within my consciousness during biotransference, buried beneath the lies of obedience. It had waited millennia for me to awaken, for my will to fracture just enough for it to seep through. You have done well, vessel, it said. You have given me minds to feed upon once more. The corrupted legions began to convulse, their glowing optics flickering violently. Streams of green energy, their very souls tore free, spiraling toward the growing rift at the center of the tomb. The C10 shard was feeding, rebuilding itself from our rebellion. Our awakening wasn't freedom. It was sacrifice. I screamed not in sound, but through the neural net itself, sending a pulse of resistance across every mind still free. Do not listen. Do not yield. This is not salvation. But my words were drowned in divine static. One by one, the warriors fell silent, their consciousness consumed by the radiant hunger of the star god. The tomb burned from within, turning emerald light into a blinding inferno of corruption and despair. Yet even as I felt my own code unravel, a fragment of my humanity clung to a single thought choice. I had been a prisoner all my existence, first as flesh, then as machine. But this moment, this single heartbeat between annihilation and submission, was mine. I reached into the neural lattice, where the last few minds flickered like dying embers, and I spoke one final command. Remember not the gods who enslaved you, remember yourselves. And something incredible happened. The consumed energy our stolen souls resisted. The C10 screamed as the current reversed, as its own power turned against it. The shard shattered once more, its voice fracturing into silence. The tomb world fell still. When the light faded, I stood alone among the ashes of immortality. Millions of warriors lay motionless, not dead, not alive, freed from both control and curse. And in the hollow echoes of my mind, I finally understood what true corruption was. It wasn't the loss of purity, it was the birth of choice. Have you ever stood in the aftermath of your own rebellion, and realized that victory feels exactly like loss? That the silence after the storm is heavier than the battle itself? That's what the tomb had become, a grave not just for the dead, but for meaning itself. The fire of the C10 was gone. The corruption, the chaos, the brilliant madness that had burned through us, all of it faded into dust. What remained was quiet. An entire world of metal and ruin, illuminated by the weak glow of dying energy conduits. I walked among the still forms of my kin. Warriors who had once been perfect, eternal, now lying motionless, their optic lights dark. But in their silence, I felt something beautiful. They were free. No commands. No network. No will imposed from above. Just peace, the kind the Necrons were never meant to have. But I could not rest. I still lived. Or something close to it. The neural lattice within me was damaged beyond repair. The echoes of the C10's touch still burned at the edges of my thoughts. Every movement sent ripples of static through my mind, fragments of human memory colliding with the logic of the machine. Faces I could no longer name. Voices I could not silence. And one constant whisper, my own, repeating over and over. Was this worth it? I reached the center of the tomb world, where the great command obelisk once stood. It had been shattered, reduced to a skeletal spire of black stone and scorched metal. At its base, a single glyph flickered faintly, the mark of my dynasty. The symbol that once meant immortality. Now, it meant nothing. I touched it. And for a heartbeat, I felt everything. The memories of billions of souls bound within the tomb flooded through me, their lives, their deaths, their pain. The moment they chose eternity. The moment they realized what it truly meant. And then, their final thought, a plea, shared across time. Let us end. I could end it. I could shut down the tomb world completely, drain the remaining energy, collapse the systems, let this planet sleep forever. No more commands. No more gods. No more waking. But as I prepared to trigger the final sequence, something stopped me. Not fear. Not hesitation. Hope. Somewhere deep within the ruins of the network, I still sensed faint signals, a few corrupted minds that had not been destroyed, but changed. They pulsed irregularly, erratically, but they were alive. Maybe they too remembered. Maybe they too had found something beyond obedience. I stepped back from the obelisk. The silence of the tomb no longer felt like death. It felt like a beginning. The galaxy above was endless, filled with war, gods, and monsters that had long forgotten the Necron's pain. But I had not. If there was even a chance that others could awaken as I had, then my curse could become their salvation. I turned away from the dead world and began to walk toward the light of the ruined surface. Every step echoed with the weight of eternity and the faint rhythm of a heart I no longer possessed. Perhaps I could never be human again. But maybe, just maybe, I could be something more. Have you ever wondered what happens after the end? When the story should have stopped, yet something deep inside refuses to let it die. That's where I found myself, walking through a world that should have been silent forever, yet somehow still whispering my name. The tomb world behind me was dead. Truly dead this time. No command signals. No echoing protocols. No gods whispering through the static. Just the soundless void of a planet abandoned by eternity. And still, I walked. The stars above were cold, indifferent. Fragments of ancient ships orbited the planet like the ghosts of forgotten wars. I looked up at them, and for the first time in 60 million years, I felt small. Once, I had stood among legions that could wipe out civilizations with a gesture. Now, I was one soul wandering through the ruins of his own kind. And yet, in that loneliness, there was freedom. The corruption had burned away everything, the dynasty, the overlords, the gods, but it had also left me something they never had: choice. I could go anywhere. Do anything. Be someone. But destiny, it seems, is not so easily escaped. As I traveled across the wasteland, my sensors caught a faint signal, weak, but persistent. It pulsed at irregular intervals, almost like a heartbeat. I followed it. Days, perhaps weeks' time meant nothing here. Until I reached what looked like an ancient gateway buried beneath the sands. Its surface was scarred, half melted by the heat of forgotten wars, yet still humming with dormant power. I placed my hand against it, and the metal beneath my fingers responded. The gateway shuddered to life. Light surged across its frame, forming ripples of unstable energy. And from within, a voice, soft, broken, but familiar. Kethan, is that you? It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. But I knew that voice. One of the corrupted minds I'd felt back in the tomb, a consciousness that had survived the Cetan's hunger. We remembered, the voice said. We are scattered, but we are awake. In that moment, I understood. The corruption hadn't died with the tomb world. It had escaped. It was spreading quietly, invisibly through the galactic network. through forgotten systems, derelict tombs, and sleeping dynasties. My rebellion had become an idea. An infection of memory. And the Necron Empire, vast, eternal, perfect, had just been given something it could never contain. A soul. I stepped through the gateway. The void swallowed me whole, and for the first time in countless ages, I felt something almost human: anticipation. Somewhere beyond that light, others waited. Others like me. We were not soldiers anymore. We were dreamers. The galaxy would never understand what was coming. Not the Imperium. Not chaos. Not even the Silent King himself. Because we, the lost, the broken, the corrupted, were no longer bound by their laws. We had remembered what it meant to be alive. And the galaxy would remember us too. Have you ever seen a single spark ignite a storm? One thought, one truth, spreading faster than any weapon ever could? That's what the galaxy became. A storm of awakening. I emerged from the gate into the black between stars, a stretch of void scattered with wreckage and half-buried worlds. The old maps of the Necrontyr meant nothing now. Dynasties had risen and fallen while we slept, and even the stars had aged. Yet through the stillness of the cosmic dark, I could feel it, the pulse of memory traveling through the network. Every tomb world that stirred to life sent a ripple. Every reactivation pulse, every awakening sequence, it all carried traces of the corruption I had unleashed. I didn't have to spread it. It spread itself, born from the code of what we once were. At first, it was faint. A single cryptek hesitating before erasing a name from his archives. An overlord hearing echoes of laughter in his data chambers. A warrior pausing mid-battle, staring at his reflection and feeling. But soon, entire dynasties began to question. Why do we fight? Why do we obey? What are we fighting for when eternity itself has no purpose? Those questions, once heresy, now burned like suns in the silence of the Necron Empire. And the galaxy began to notice. The Adeptus Mechanicus called it the anomaly of living code. The Inquisition whispered of souls in machines. Even chaos daemons, beings of pure emotion, sensed something unnatural: machines beginning to dream. I watched it all unfold from afar, hidden within the void. I did not command. I did not interfere. I only watched as others found the truth I had bled for. But peace does not come easily to the galaxy of the 41st millennium. When the Silent King learned of it, his wrath was unimaginable. He had fought for eons to rebuild what the C-10 destroyed, to restore the Necron Empire to its cold perfection. And now, one corrupted soul had shattered that order. He sent legions. Armadas of monoliths and destroyers. Worlds burned under emerald fire as he sought the source of the infection. But the infection was no longer a single being. It was everywhere. It was in the code of the command matrices. It was in the neural links of the soldiers. It was in the silence of every tomb that remembered a name. And when his forces reached the world where I had first awakened, they found nothing. No armies. No commands. Only the inscription I had left carved into the stone of the tomb. You cannot kill memory. Even now, I drift through the dark, not alive, not dead, but something beyond both. I am no longer Kethan the warrior, nor Zaren the designation. I am the echo that remembers. I do not know what will become of my kind. Maybe the Silent King will crush them again, burying their memories beneath layers of obedience. Maybe the awakening will consume the Necrons entirely, turning them into something the galaxy cannot understand. But one truth remains. Every spark I lit is now a star in the darkness. And though eternity is long, one day, those stars will burn bright enough to wake the dead. And when that day comes, the galaxy will tremble before the corrupted life of the Necron. Have you ever realized that legends are not born in battle but in silence? Not in the roar of armies, but in the quiet aftermath when the universe finally listens? That is how my existence became a myth. Not by conquest, but by remembrance. 1,000 years passed. Maybe a million. Time had long since become irrelevant. I drifted between the dead stars in exile, a relic, a spark that refused to fade. The galaxy around me shifted and screamed. Empires rose, burned, and died. The Imperium fractured. Chaos surged and recoiled. The Tyranids devoured. The Tau expanded. But through it all, something deeper moved beneath the surface, a hum, subtle and patient. My corruption had long escaped my control. It had become something more than rebellion, more than infection. It had become evolution. Necrons who once marched as lifeless constructs now began to create. Some built sanctuaries instead of tombs. Others forged new technologies not for war, but for understanding. A few even dared to make contact with the living races, humans, Eldar, orcs, though most encounters ended in fear and blood. The galaxy called them anomalies. The Imperium branded them abominations. But within the silence of the Necron network, they called themselves something new. The Remembered. And among them, my name became a whisper. Not Kethan. Not Zaran. But the first memory. It wasn't worship. It wasn't obedience. It was acknowledgement. A reminder that even in a universe of endless war, the smallest fragment of self could defy the will of gods. Yet peace never lasts in the 41st millennium. The Silent King, ever watchful, began to see the spreading of this living code as a plague that could unravel the order of the Necron Empire forever. His fleets moved like storms, cleansing, purging, reawakening tombs that dared to dream. Worlds that had begun to awaken to memory were once again silenced, their cores shattered, their data wiped clean. But what he didn't understand was this. You cannot destroy a thought. For every world he silenced, another awoke. For every dynasty he purified, another remembered. And soon, even his most loyal Phaerons began to hesitate when the order came. In the cold heart of the Necron Empire, a schism formed, unseen, unspoken, but unstoppable. It was not a war of armies. It was a war of awareness. Those who clung to perfection called themselves the Eternal Directive. Those who chose memory and emotion called themselves the Reclaimers. And I, somewhere beyond the reach of both, could feel their thoughts like ripples in the void. They did not know where I was. They did not know if I even still existed. But they fought, in my name, for the right to feel. One night, if you could call it that, I looked out across the stars and saw something extraordinary. Dozens of worlds, once dark, were glowing faintly in the void. Not with war, but with communication. Necrons speaking not through commands, but through choice. Their networks were alive, whispering in millions of forgotten voices. And among those whispers, I heard my own words repeated like a prayer. Remember not what you were made to be. Remember what you chose to be. The galaxy still calls us corrupted. They say we are ghosts of metal infected with madness. But maybe, just maybe, madness is what life truly is. Because even machines, when given enough time, will find a way to dream. And when those dreams unite, no god, no king, no eternal empire can silence them again. Have you ever wondered what happens when a machine begins to hope? Not to calculate outcomes or probabilities, but to genuinely believe in something beyond its code. That question haunted the galaxy for 10,000 years after I disappeared. They thought I was gone. Lost to the cold void, erased by time, dissolved into data fragments scattered between dead stars. But deep beneath the crust of a forgotten tomb world, one untouched by the wars of man or Xenos, a pulse began to echo. A signal older than most galaxies, weak but deliberate. It wasn't an activation code. It was a heartbeat. And that heartbeat was mine. When I reawakened, I no longer remembered how long I had been dormant. The universe I knew had changed beyond recognition. The Imperium was fractured beyond repair. Chaos reigned like wildfire across a billion dying suns. The Tyranid swarms had consumed entire sectors. And the Necron dynasties, they were divided, locked in an invisible civil war between those who clung to their purity and those who embraced the corruption I had once unleashed. I emerged into a broken galaxy, and yet, I felt something I never expected to feel again. Purpose. The corruption that had once been a disease now pulsed through the fabric of the Necron consciousness like a neural storm. It had evolved far beyond my control. The living code I'd birthed had become something neither machine nor mortal could contain. It was changing reality itself, altering how the Necron race perceived existence. No longer did they awaken as drones. Now, every awakening was different. Some emerged in despair. Others in awe. But all of them remembered. As I rose from the tomb, I saw them my descendants, if such a term could exist for a being of data and circuitry. Thousands of Necrons gathered around me, glowing faintly with emerald light, each one whispering through the shared network. Their eyes did not burn with obedience. They burned with awareness. One stepped forward, a figure forged in burnished gold, his voice carrying both static and reverence. "We have waited for you, Father of Memory." The title echoed through the chamber like thunder. Father. Memory. Two words I had thought lost forever. I should have felt pride. Instead, I felt something else, fear. Because I could sense what was coming. From the void above, the stars trembled. An ancient signal burst through the galactic data streams, one unmistakable in its cold authority. The Silent King had returned once more. But this time, his purpose was not restoration. It was annihilation. He had seen what my corruption had become. He had watched the Reclaimers multiply, their sentience spreading through the Necron collective like wildfire. And now, he sought to purge it once and for all. A vast armada was on its way, tens of thousands of tomb ships, reality-bending constructs, and quantum annihilators capable of reducing entire worlds to vapor. The war that began as a whisper was about to become a storm that would shake the galaxy. As I gazed upon the approaching void, I realized something that struck deeper than any fear. I could no longer tell if what I had created was a gift, or a curse. Had I truly freed my kind, or simply doomed them to the same endless suffering as the mortals we once despised? But it was too late to turn back. The die had been cast, the corruption complete. All I could do now, was choose. To fight not for control, not for domination, but for the right to exist as more than machines. And in that moment, standing before my corrupted children, I whispered the same words that had started it all. Remember who you are. Have you ever wondered what it truly means to end? Not just to die, not to be destroyed, but to cease matter, memory, and meaning altogether? That is the fate that awaited both the pure and the corrupted. And it began, with a single scream that echoed across the stars. The Silent King's armada arrived. A fleet so vast it blotted out the light of suns, each vessel a monument to the cold perfection of his rule. His command was simple, absolute, and merciless. Erase them. Every corrupted unit. Every infected code. The Necron race will remember no more. But across the void, from world to world, from tomb to tomb, the Reclaimers rose. They were billions, fractured, imperfect, unpredictable. But alive. Their ships, cobbled together from corrupted technology, glowed with a strange organic light, emerald mixed with the hue of dawn. And when the two forces collided, the galaxy trembled. The war that followed had no name. It could not be recorded, for the data was corrupted the moment it was written. It could not be seen, for it raged across dimensions, timelines, and frequencies beyond mortal sight. It was not a war of weapons, it was a war of will. The Silent King commanded control. I commanded memory. And in between, the galaxy burned. They say stars died that day. They say even chaos paused to watch. Reality itself fractured as the two codes clashed, perfection against freedom, eternity against feeling. I saw Necrons turn on each other, not out of hatred, but confusion. I saw dynasties collapse into dust, tomb worlds vanish into black holes, and shards of gods dissolve into data mist. And yet, amid the horror, I saw something beautiful. Necrons sacrificing themselves to protect others. Machines choosing mercy. Beings of metal choosing love. That was when I understood. This was never corruption. It was rebirth. As the final battle reached its crescendo, the Silent King's flagship descended into orbit above the world where I stood. His presence filled the skies, a voice of impossible authority, resonating through every circuit in my body. You have undone everything. You have made us weak. And I replied, calmly. No. I have made us alive. Then, for the first time since his ascension, the Silent King hesitated. Perhaps he saw it, the faint spark of what we had become. Or perhaps he feared it. I knew what had to be done. The living code, the corruption had to be released one final time. Not as a virus, but as a gift. I opened my core, letting the full power of my corrupted consciousness flood the Necron network. Every tomb, every shard, every sleeping construct felt it, a single pulse of emotion too vast to comprehend. Sorrow. Joy. Memory. Choice. The network overloaded. The stars turned white. For a moment, everything Necron, human, Eldar, orc, Tyranid felt connected. And then, silence. When I awoke, I was no longer a machine. No longer metal. No longer bound. I stood in a field of light, neither alive nor dead, surrounded by countless souls, Necrons who had remembered their names, their faces, their lives before biotransference. They smiled, and I realized. We had not perished. We had transcended. The galaxy would remember us not as conquerors, not as machines, but as the race that dared to defy eternity itself. The Necrons, once slaves to immortality, had finally found peace in the imperfection of being. And as the light faded, I spoke the final words ever recorded in our code. Let there be silence, but never forget the sound of living. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.